Should Battlefield be realistic or Arcadey? A topic I see questioned all over YouTube, Twitter and the interwebs in general, and hopefully a question we can get to the bottom of today. So in recent videos I've had a lot of people use realism as a rationale as to why things are a certain way in Battlefield. So as an example, just the other day I uploaded a video about the imbalance of Battlefield 4 vehicles, and a lot of people rationalised the US's vehicles being generally stronger than China or Russia's by simply saying, well, it's realism, obviously. The US have a stronger military force in reality, and that is correctly represented in-game by their superior vehicles. So that got me thinking about the whole argument, right, of how realistic should Battlefield be? And it's not the first time I've heard it, and I'm willing to bet it's not the first time you've heard it either. Now, in preparation for this video, I threw up a poll on my channel asking quite simply, what should Battlefield be? Either A, as realistic as possible, or B, a solid arcade shooter. So this screenshot here was taken after around 1,000 votes, and it doesn't really get much more even than this. And I think this shows that this matter splits at least my community pretty much down the middle when it comes to this subject. Should it be as realistic as possible or not? Well, I think it's important to begin with the fact that Battlefield is of course based in reality. You know, we use real world vehicles and real world weapons. All of the maps are real world locations, but I think you have to draw a line in the sand somewhere between realism and the more arcadey mechanics for the sake of gameplay balance. For example, in reality, a JDAM bomb from an attack jet can be dropped from over a mile high and has a blast radius of hundreds of meters, right? But would that be something that you would like to see in the next game? You know, a bomb that can just destroy a large section of a map? I'm guessing for most of you right now, the answer is no. Some things need to be realistic, it's true, but some things can't be, or it simply wouldn't be good for the game. Every single game has to dance the line between fantasy and reality. What defines their genre is where they fall between those categories. So for example, armor, squad, insurgency, etc. would be classed as more realistic shooters, or, you know, even milsims. But even those games have a degree of fantasy to them. If you die, you can respawn in a new round, for example. Now, Battlefield, in my opinion, has always leaned more towards the arcadey side of things, and you know, it has swayed back and forth a little bit in and out of the realm of realism as it's gone through its various incarnations, but overall I would say most people look at Battlefield as an arcade shooter, and personally for me, I think that's the right decision for the game, and here's why. So firstly, I would like to reference another game, another shooter that's been around for a long time, CSGO. Which has really stood the test of time. You know, Counter-Strike has been around for a long time and was well known even before Global Offensive, of course. I think one of the main reasons for that is because it's as balanced an experience as you can get, really, and it generally leaves the only changeable factor in how a match turns out down to player input. How you play, the choices you make in-game with buying weapons, etc. How a match turns out always comes down to the player. But it still manages to strike some significant differences between both teams. Take the maps for example. You would think for absolute balance the map would have to be completely symmetrical, right? A complete mirror. But they're not completely symmetrical, just like Battlefield maps really, which means sometimes the terrorists or the counter-terrorists have a slight advantage or disadvantage depending on the map. They even use different weapons, the AK being one of the most popular for the terrorists, while the counter-terrorists get the M4. So how do they get around this balance issue? Well, it's simple really, isn't it? You play 15 rounds on one side, and then you switch to the other side for the next 15. Just look at football, right? Halfway through the game, they switch sides, just for the sake of balance and fairness. Sometimes I wonder if this is something DICE have ever considered. Say, instead of a single 800 ticket round, they could have you play 400 tickets as one side, and then switch sides and play as the other side for 400 tickets. That way they could make bigger changes to the map layouts, or have vehicles and weapons that were only available for a specific faction, because halfway through the match you would switch sides anyway. You know, just allow them to diversify things a bit. You know, this is one of the reasons that vehicle users were in an uproar in Battlefield 5, because the planes of one faction often had vastly better upgrade paths compared to the same class of plane from the opposing faction. Now, I know what the obvious question here is going to be. Let's say it's US versus Russia, just like in Battlefield 4, right? The US have a little advantage in terms of their vehicles, and let's say you play as the US side and you win your round, and then you play as the Russians and you lose the second round. So that would make it 1-1. So who wins the actual match? Well, in that situation, you could simply let the difference in tickets decide, so whoever won their round by more tickets would win the entire match. Now, I know a lot of people still prefer more realism in Battlefield, and those people often get the same answer thrown in their face. If you want more realism, just go and play Armour, go and play Squad. But, you know, maybe they just really love Battlefield, but just want it to be more realistic. I think that's the people DICE were catering to when they put in the hardcore mode. You know, no 3D spotting, no third-person vehicles, etc. Personally, for me, you know, I've never really been a fan of it, but I still understand that there are people who only play hardcore and prefer a more realistic experience, so I think hardcore mode is worth keeping in the game. But if we're talking about the overall direction of the game as a whole, I really think Arcadey is the way to go. There are so many little mechanics in Battlefield 4 alone that really make the game fun that simply wouldn't be possible if we went all in on realism. Just look at Rendezvous and Rodeo Zooks, such amazing Battlefield moments. Now, in reality, there is no way you could hit a flying jet behind you with a projectile whilst being ejected out of an aircraft. Similarly, there's no way that you could ride on top of your vehicle either. You know, neither of these things would be possible if the game was too realistic, and that's probably the reason we lost both of those things with the arrival of Battlefield 1. Okay, yes, I know planes didn't have ejector seats, but Battlefield 1 was also when we got the vehicle entrance animations, which basically made these tricks impossible. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I think taking advantage of quirky mechanics, whether they were intended or not, is kind of cool. If we go too far down the realism road, it'll just make for a boring game. Those are my thoughts on the subject. I would love to hear yours down below. Thank you once again for checking out one of my videos, guys. If you enjoyed it, then hitting that like button is always a big help for the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. I'll be covering everything on the run up to this year's Battlefield, and then putting out, hopefully, a ton of great vehicle guides and gameplay. So, you know, if that's your thing, then feel free to join us for that. Have a good one, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.